I'm joined, as I am each month, by our own Dr. Joe Sirven, Mayo neurologist and host of the WJCT program, What's Health Got to Do with It? He visits us for a monthly house call to talk medical news, headlines, but he also takes your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. You can join our conversation at 904-549-2937 or emailing First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. Good morning, Dr. Joe.
Good morning. Happy June.
Happy Monday. Nice to see you back in the chair here.
It is so good to be here with you, Ann. Always a pleasure.
I want to talk to you about this report that you showed me that came out recently. It looks at how long it is taking people to get doctor's appointments, and it looked at a number of specialties across the country. Tell us what the report found, first of all.
Bottom line is that the demand to get into any doctor, primary care, specialty is just extraordinary. And it's taking bluntly months to get appointments. It varies per city. It varies per geographic area. Here in Jacksonville, if you talk to anyone, I know we chat about this. I'm a physician, and we wait too
Yeah.
as well. The demand is just so high. So the bottom line is that the study is just telling us is that it's taking months to get appointments. When I talk to friends and family and they say, you know what, I got an appointment and it's 3 months away and I'm going to find someone else. I go, don't cancel it. Keep that in line. If you find something sooner, great. But bottom line is it's just taking a while to get to anybody.
This found that the average wait time was 31 days. And that's an increase of almost 50% since they
Yeah.
first started doing this survey in 2004. But I thought it was interesting that some specialties are really especially problematic. OBGYN, dermatology, cardiology, some specialties you really can't wait for.
Normally in any type of life-threatening type of situation, there's the emergency room. So let me start that so that there's not any sense of panic on one end. But let's say you find in a visit new cancer or things of that sort. Oftentimes, what occurs is in most practices, there are algorithms that float you up to the top of that list. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to wait, but let's just say that there are mechanisms that are utilized to try to address it. I read this and it kind of flows to me as what I see just even in my own area of neurology, where it does take a ridiculous amount of time to get appointments for things. And it's just because I will just, and it just jives with everything I'm seeing. It's just that the demand for all medical services are just incredible.
Some of these waits were hundreds of days. I
Yeah.
mean, so we're talking about,
Yep.
an average of, somewhere between 40 days and, 42 days. But in there was in Portland, people were waiting 231 days to see an OBGYN, which is astonishing. So what are the factors that they're looking at? I mean, you talked about demand, but what about, the number of
Right.
physicians aging out, maybe an increase in certain medical conditions?
Yeah, what it is telling us is that those shortages that we've talked on my show, on your show here, and that we hear about, they're real. There is a finite number of physicians. Are medical schools opening. There are also PA schools that are expanding, nurse practitioner programs that are expanding, that are trying to meet this demand. But this is a very realistic, honest metric of what a shortage looks like. What Because we talk about it, it's like this abstract thing,
Mhm.
but what does an abstract thing look like concretely? How long do you wait to see somebody? And when I hear that, especially the OBGYN in Oregon, that just tells me, oh my goodness, that's where you see problems with a very specific specialty, and perhaps all of the things that have been ongoing in reproductive health have frightened some people not to go into that specialty. And this is what it starts to look like.
If you have a question for Dr. Joe Sirven, or if you've been waiting for a doctor's appointment, you can join our conversation. Give us a call at 904-549-2937 or email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. One thing, Dr. Joe, that we hear a lot about is practice consolidation. What role does that play in delays in getting seen by a physician?
Oftentimes, practice consolidation, what it should do, in theory, it should make things run more efficiently and open up more slots, especially if you run it in a way that's efficient and that can be maintained over time. But sometimes in those efficiencies, they say, we shouldn't have two offices, or we shouldn't have this or some extra site or something along those lines. And as a result, in those efficiencies, you lose appointment slots and things of that sort.
So there's contraction even as they're sort of having more doctors available.
Exactly. And there's all of these other sources, what you just brought out. Remember the burnout from COVID? Several people, and I know this from my own colleagues, they have elected not to do full-time practice. They want to combine it with something else. Every time you do those reductions, those are slots on a calendar that were used to see someone. And oftentimes when you have that, you have a group of physicians that are of a certain generation moving on to areas of retirement, looking to say, I don't really want to continue doing this. Again, it just translates into this.
One thing that affected local patients here for months and months were these standoffs between insurance companies and
Yep.
providers. And we had a big, long battle between Florida Blue and Baptist. We had a big, long battle between UF Health and United Healthcare. And in that interim, people can't be seen by their regular physicians. They almost have to go find a new physician unless they want to wait that out. And so I would think that would add to this potential backlog.
Yeah, any of these type of insurance battles are not helpful for anyone because ultimately that's getting into the world of payment, paychecks, things of that sort. And that starts to add into the equation of people who are seeing patients. Well, I don't want to, if there's not going to be, I know all physicians want to do their best, or providers, but if there's no payment coming back for whatever, that is another incentive, and that kind of compounds all of this.
Sure.
Again, I look at this almost like as the final metric. Like, if you see someone when you need to see them, when you want to see them. The bottom line, our valve, though, is the emergency room. But as we've talked about on this show as well, we can't start crowding those things out because this is how the system works, and we try to find that balance and equilibrium.
Right. And I mean, I guess worst case scenario is that wait delays care that could be really important or even life-saving.
Absolutely. I mean, again, if you get into like finding a funny heart problem or a cancer, those are the type of things that have to kind of get addressed. And if you're not getting screened, this is why we see all those numbers kind of play out against us, if you will.
The alternative there is to kind of rely more. I know Florida has been moving to try to rely more on health practitioners that aren't necessarily doctors, but physician assistants, or nurse practitioners.
Yeah, PAs or physician assistants or nurse practitioners are kind of helping to fill that void. But even in those situations and circumstances, there just aren't enough of these providers either, because there's only a finite number of programs and schools that are available for us. So as much as we want to kind of rely on that, the solution is that we have to figure out a way to make this be sustainable for everyone. But I look at this and go, Houston, we have a problem. We need to get this fixed.
Right. We've got a call from Jessica in San Marco. Good morning, Jessica. Go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this topic. I had a question. I'm of the age now where several high school and college friends that I went to school with are physicians, and many of them are fleeing the country, definitely fleeing Florida, because they practice in specialties like OBGYNs where the political climate makes it impossible for them to deliver good care. They also don't want to be practicing in a country where they're held hostage to for-profit health insurance systems. That just kills their souls. And I know of many countries, especially in Europe, that are drastically changing their immigration policies to be able to recruit specialists in STEM, especially American doctors. that's where another issue is that I see my own providers leaving to go live in Germany, for example. And I'll take my answers off the air.
Thanks, Jessica.
Jessica, you brought up a great point. I just literally saw an article the other day. I forget which of the major websites was posting it, but about a very large exodus of American physicians to our friendly neighbor up north, to Canada,
Yeah.
which is completely the opposite of what we have known for decades. Over the entire life of my career, it was the other way.
Hmm.
The Canadian lines leaving for physicians to kind of come down here to the U.S. In that regard. What you're saying is absolutely true, Jessica. It's another piece of the puzzle, if you will. And yes, places like Germany and Britain and other locations suddenly look interesting,
Yeah.
and they have a huge demand because they also have a generation of people who are retiring,
Retiring.
and suddenly that doesn't look so terrible to kind of go out there. So you're absolutely correct.
Well, I do want to move on now to another topic, and I feel like it's almost like the RFK Jr. beat. And when I talk to you every month, there's sort of a new development with the
Yes.
Health and Human Services Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he's done a lot of controversial things since he took over. The last time you were on, we were discussing these threatening letters that a federal prosecutor had sent targeting some medical journals that he has criticized. But now he is proposing undercutting these medical journals in other ways, basically preventing federal researchers from publishing in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Lancet, some of the most prestigious medical journals around. What would be the impact? Why would this be happening?
The why, I think there's some element of this feels more like retributional. I will say this, that when the New England Journal of Medicine and some of and I think even the Journal of American Medical Association, when they chose to get into, I know the New England Journal did for certain, into endorsing a presidential candidate. There are consequences when you step out of that lane. Now,
Mhm.
I know on some people wanted to make sure that medicine or the voice of medicine was heard politically, but these are scientific journals, and now we're seeing what's what I call the retribution of like, well, this is what can happen when people have short, long memories and the ability to make a change. It's stunning to me because we're playing. This is where some of the truths come out. Is everything perfect about some of these journals and the peer review process? No, but you don't use a nuclear bomb to fix problems that can be adjusted, if you will. I don't know what this looks like. He, in that proposal to not have people who receive NIH grants publish in these journals, he said that they would be publishing in journals that would be created and controlled by the NIH. That starts to sound somewhat concerning because then someone could walk in and adjust what gets published or not. Uh, I find this totally troubling and disconcerting when it comes to this issue.
And I mean, there are people who are saying that if, government scientists are forced to publish only in government journals, it would essentially delegitimize any research that they're doing. I mean, it would not be credible.
Exactly. And that's the problem because one of the things that, regardless of how you feel about those journals, it's like that editorial independence is what allows for the different voices to be heard. Are they perfect? No. But is this solution the right way to go? I don't believe so.
Mhm.
Not by any stretch.
And we know, of course, that this, kind of came right as RFK bypassed the CDC and the
That's
usual
right.
process on the COVID vaccine, basically pulling back, who that would be recommended for. And as a result, sort of who would be covered by insurance for these recommended vaccines. Also, 3 billion in cuts for NIH. So some really consequential impacts of this HHS secretary.
It makes me very nervous because at the end of the day, uh, what happens in this particular arena affects us all, and people can get hurt. And to me, that's the line, if you will.
So, kind of related in terms of just, the dispersal of information. The Florida Department of Health
Yeah.
has begun releasing surveillance data. It had just sort of without explanation pulled its disease tracking information offline. It was only discovered by the Florida Sun Sentinel in May, but it had been apparently months prior. And this is a database that a lot of doctors and epidemiologists rely on. Why is that?
Because these are, you always, when you're looking at any type of condition or diseases, you need to know the numbers, especially when you're talking about infectious diseases. And you always have to know, like, is there an outbreak in my area? Is there an issue going on in my county, in my neighborhood, if you will? Because this gets down all the way to the zip code level. And so when you don't have that, we're kind of flying blind. If no one knows that there's a condition going around and someone starts coughing and we don't realize, oh, that's measles or something along those lines, then that just goes ahead and spreads like a wildfire. So not having data means that we're all operating in kind of a blind way. I don't know what was going on there. We actually covered some of this with in our show, What's Health Got to Do with It? We asked our Nemours epidemiologist who joins us on this. There's no answers to why it wasn't there. Suddenly it's there again. But it is a little on the odd side.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem that it is part of sort of a continuing shift, perhaps by government agencies at the federal and state level from supporting or promoting vaccines, because of course, the things that tie right into the illness and the data tracker are things like measles, right? That's
Exactly.
a disease people are very concerned about right now. Is almost entirely solvable, preventable with a vaccine, but there has been this pushback on vaccines.
Exactly. And that's, I suspect, is one of the pieces of this. Again, there's been no explanation. It is now back up. Luckily, we're not hearing these reports of anything occurring. That's the good news in all of this. But it's always concerning because when you don't have that information, you can't say it. I can't look you straight in the face and go, there's no problem here.
Mhm.
This is the type of stuff that validates that we're okay.
I want to switch to a lighter topic because there was a recent ranking that came out of the top 15 medical shows of all times. And I'm curious about this because, I know a lot of lawyers who watch, like lawyer courtroom procedural type shows. Are doctors generally big fans of the ERs and the pits and all of the shows that document or purport to sort of portray life inside that world?
Well, and it depends on how honest that doctor wants to be with you, to be honest with you. So I'm gonna just say I am a junkie for this stuff. Yes, I work in this, but I love watching medical TV, mostly because it's an interesting thing to kind of see what's resonating or what's echoing back to me. And I've kind of my wife and I, she's a nurse, and she's also one that will go down this road with me. We love catching these dramas and either laughing or like being triggered by them, depending on the show.
What is triggering, for instance?
I will give you the one show that really hits me is The Pit on Max.
Uh-huh.
So this is where one season is 15 episodes. Each episode represents 1 hour of a shift in a fictional Pittsburgh emergency room that has the former star of ER in it.
So by the end of the season, you've watched the full shift?
Their full shift. Now, let me tell you that here's the unrealistic part. If I had survived 4 hours of this shift, I would not be practicing medicine by what I saw. I mean, it's like, who has a shift like that? But on the other hand, when you take it and look at it in pieces, it's incredibly resonating to what does a stretched health system look like and the folks who have to work it. Now, it's done in an emergency room, and so all of the issues that we talk about, from a measles outbreak to a shooting or something along those lines, you get to see it play out. It's, as I said, it's very hyper realistic and added for that extra drama, but it is pretty accurate in terms of the individual pieces to it.
You could take an hour of that and sort of buy that was a single hour out of it, but perhaps not 15 in a row like that.
All I know is that in one episode, I remember my wife and I watching an episode, and by the end of it, and none of us drink alcohol, wondering if there was anything in our liquor cabinet. And I'm not acknowledging that we need to be drinking when we watch
Right.
TV. Right?
The ones that did make this list included Northern Exposure, which I thought was funny,
I like that one.
House, of course, St. Elsewhere, it's the classic Scrubs, Grey's Anatomy, and ER was number one. What's your take on that? Because I know that Pitt has been kind of compared to that in terms of its hyperrealism.
I loved ER. I thought it was very good, but it also brought out incredible actors. When you have someone like George Clooney, leading the cast, that's obviously going to do very well. In those early seasons, I thought ER fit the bill to a certain level. The Pit takes that DNA, if you will, and they put some steroids onto it. I loved St. Elsewhere. When I was in med school, that was a show we all watched and aspired to. Denzel Washington came out of that.
Right.
Loved that show. But what's interesting about these shows, and I think we're in a golden era. If you watch all of them, they really echo the feeling of what it's like to be in medicine now, and that's the difference between St. Elsewhere or The Pit. St. Elsewhere, it showed you a lot of drama with the patients. When you see The Pit, it really gives you the feeling, not necessarily the accuracy, but the feeling of what does it look like to be in a stretched health system where insurance and all these issues that we talk about on your show daily show up in one location.
Interesting. So they're focusing a lot more on that superstructure around not just like the patient care, but all
Correct.
of the things that contribute to the setting.
And what happens to the people who have to work it? You get the vibe of the burnout. That's what I think was most interesting. My wife still, she loves to watch Call the Midwife. She's on PBS
Oh,
here.
yeah, right.
We still love it, and they're talking about measles outbreaks and reproductive rights in the 1960s. And I'm like, oh my God, here we are 30, 40 years, 60 years later, and they were talking about it as like a period piece, and here we are talking about the same things in a different costume.
Yeah. I want to just briefly touch on something that you and I were talking about this morning. It was a study that was done by JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, by someone I think that
Yes,
you know from your Mayo
exactly.
world, but it offered some connection between people who had Parkinson's disease and the proximity in which they lived to golf courses.
Yeah, this one was interesting. So this is a study that really talks about a correlation and not a causation. So something about the population of people who are playing in these golf courses or live near these golf courses have a higher rate of Parkinson's disease than not. So this is correlation. What we have to be very careful about is they did not establish a causation. Now, there are some things you could say. Well, is there something about how the pesticide use or whatever you use to keep golf courses affecting it? Well, that's one thing. But on the other hand, I will point out people who play golf, that's pretty good sport for balance and walking and has its own health parts. So, what we don't know from this study, although tantalizing, is what direction, what's the direction here, what's really causing it. It just makes me ask more questions. Is it that older folks are playing golf and that's the population that they control for it? This is one of those that I'd like to see more before we kind of go there. And we'd have and I wouldn't discourage people from playing golf. It's a good thing and it's great for balance.
Yeah.
But this is one that just makes you just say, is there something here?
Yeah, it is interesting. They found that people living within the water service area of a golf course had nearly double the odds of Parkinson's compared with those not in those areas. So something to watch on. Maybe we'll come back at it in another day.
Absolutely. As long as I know what they controlled for, what the variables were, I think that's where we need to see if this will have a
Holds
real signal
together.
or not. But it's tantalizing nonetheless.
All right. Well, Dr. Joe Sirven, it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here.
And it is always a pleasure. Can't wait for July.
That's right. Me too.